The 2025 NFL Draft has come and gone for the Carolina Panthers, and I am liking what Dan Morgan and Dave Canales are building here in Carolina. We'll talk about it right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show right here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council, because I'm back again on Friday answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. And all you got to do is either at me or DM me over on Twitter at Julian Council, or you can just at me over on Blue Sky, also at Julian Council, to get your questions in for this week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada draft pick of the week later in the show. We've done it. We have made it through the 2025 NFL Draft, and the Panthers, man, loved a lot what they did this past weekend. Going to go over my 6 initial thoughts to the 2025 draft class, and then the rest of the week, we're going to continue to look at it. We're going to be grading the draft. I'm going to be telling you the winners and the losers of guys who are already on the roster, who are going to be impacted by the draft picks. Going to hopefully have a guest on this week. Then next week, we're going to go through each and every pick more in depth by getting to know them, hopefully having the Locked On college team host of all the draft picks here in Carolina. So plenty of draft talk going on over the next couple of weeks before we have rookie minicamp. Do we get into the schedule release? That's going to happen on May 14th later on next month. And we're going to also look at OTAs. So plenty going on the next month or so here on Locked On Panthers until we get to the middle of June, and then that's when they have their 6-week break. So a lot of draft talk today and for the rest of the next couple of weeks here on the show, and excited to break down this class with you. Now, sorry, getting this out a little bit later than I wanted to. I was up in LBI, New Jersey for a wedding this past weekend. Had to drive back to Philadelphia on Sunday, then fly back to Charlotte, got home around 4 or so. And I was dog tired, barely slept the whole weekend, so needed to rest up to give you the best show I possibly could. May not still be a good enough show in your eyes, but still, let's get into it. My initial thoughts. Got 6 of them. Going to give you my first 3 right here. Number 1, edge rusher to me, going into this draft, was the biggest need the Panthers had on their roster. Yeah, there was a clear hole at safety, but you could point to 2 guys in Demani Richardson, but more so Trevon Barrick, and say, okay, those guys could start. Like Nick Scott, he has started, he has played, he understands the scheme. Yes, they need to add there, but I felt like an edge rusher, I don't look at any of those guys and really feel that great about them. Like there's upside there with DJ Wonnum, and I do think if he stays healthy, he could potentially be an 8-sack guy like he was twice in his career in Minnesota. Pat Jones II, not that interested. Jadeveon Clowney as a pass rusher, okay. As a stop-the-run edge setter, certainly could like that. But at this time in his career, what kind of major impact is he going to have on a winning football team? I don't know. So I wanted to see them try to truly replace Brian Burns. That's why I felt at 8th overall, edge rusher would be the pick. But that ended up not being the pick, as Carolina decided to go with Tetairoa McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona, which I was surprised by, more so because he was the top guy on their board than that they went with a wide receiver. But still, I looked at it as that made sense. But they needed to attack the edge rusher position. And on Thursday night, plenty of people were a little concerned. Okay, all right, Panthers with wide receiver, but what are they going to do there at edge rusher? We've talked a lot about it. And on day 2, they were aggressive. They traded up not once, but twice in order to get Nick Scorton 51st overall, the edge rusher from Texas A&M by way of Purdue University. And then later on that evening at 77th overall, traded back up again there in the third round to take Princely Umanmielen, the edge rusher from Ole Miss by way of the University of Florida. That's a lot of these guys now. They played at multiple schools, and that's plenty of the guys who were drafted by Carolina this past weekend. I don't know whether Nick Scorton or Princely Umanmielen are going to end up being Pro Bowl level players. But after going wide receiver on day one, it made sense to tap into what was considered a deep edge rusher class. You could look at what top edge rushers were really there day one. I know it was Abdul Carter at 3. Then you could question whether Jalen Walker would have fit in this scheme. There's guys like James Pierce who had some things that you wondered if he would fit just being here in Charlotte in his hometown. Mike Green ended up falling down the board for off the field kind of issues. Michael Williams, there's questions about him. Shamar Stewart, questions about him. Maybe just wait until day 2 to go get players where there might be questions about them, but we're not talking about them as first rounders and placing that expectation on them from day one. So I do think it was smart for Carolina to focus on something else that was clearly, in my opinion, a need on day one, and then to wait day 2 and be aggressive in landing 2 edge rushers who were productive back in college. Scorton maybe did not have the year a lot of people expected when he went to A&M this past fall. That might have been scheme related, as we talked to Kyle Krabs about that last month or earlier this month, but still was really good a couple years ago at Purdue. Princely Umanmielen spent 5 years in school, but had his best season this past year with 10.5 sacks for Ole Miss. So 2 guys who were productive in the Big Ten and the SEC respectively, now coming over. And because they were day 2 picks, it's possible that you see them as being key contributors this upcoming season in 2025, but certainly down the line. Nick Scorton, Princely Umanmielen, those are going to be 2 guys that are going to be relied upon as pass rushers in this Carolina Panthers defense for year to come. And I'm excited to see what they can do. Number 2, I like that they didn't sit idly by at wide receiver. I know that Dan Morgan came out and said how much he loved the guys that he had on the roster, that being Adam Thielen, that being Xavier Legette, Jalen Coker, and David Moore. And there was a lot to like about what the potential was there for Legette, of course, Coker, of course, what David Moore did last year, the best year he's had since 2020, than what Adam Thielen has done in his twilight years here in Carolina the past 2 seasons, even being injured last year, was a team's leading receiver. I like Adam Thielen. I like what they had, but I felt like they needed more. And trying to find an alpha in that room was something I wanted to see them do during free agency. Now, Chris Godwin, he never became available. You can question whether he's an alpha or not. Certainly go ahead and do that. And then DK Metcalf, that trade did not come to fruition. I looked at the draft. I said, okay, Matthew Golden maybe could make sense there at 8. He adds speed. He could be that guy. Tedero McMillan, of course, has the size. He was arguably the best receiver in college football over the last couple of years combined. And the guys who came out last year, like Malik Neighbors and Roma Dunze and Marvin Harrison Jr., had a lot to say about that. But when you look at the numbers combined, like Tedero, compared to those guys, is right up there production-wise the last couple of seasons that he played in college. But I did like the fact that while they do love those guys, Dan did say that they weren't going to sit back and not do anything. They were not going to neglect the offense, and they certainly showed that by going out there with the 8th overall pick and taking Tet McMillan, which, again, it came to a surprise because we spent so much time focused on the defense. Dave Canales lied to Kay Adams. How could you ever lie to Kay Adams and telling her, oh, yeah, we're going defense there, which, you know, it's lying season, especially right before the draft. And you saw them being mocked to be taking a defensive tackle, that being Walter Nolan. That was a lie. Matt Miller was lied to, but the one guy who knew was Field Yates. And forever, we'll say, Field knew. Field Yates knew exactly what this team was going to do, and what they did was try to help out the young quarterback who had a renaissance in the final 9 games of the season in 2024, and they want to carry that over into 2025. So, yes, it was a surprise. They took Tet at 8 because, well, he was ahead of Jalen Walker. He was ahead of Michael Williams. He was ahead of a lot of other guys when I don't know if people would have thought he would have been atop the Panthers draft board once they got down to 8. I also love the fact they went out there on day 3 and took Jimmy Horn Jr., who started his career at South Florida, then was a part of that complete roster flip in Boulder with Dion, was better in 23 than he was last year in 24. But if you watch Colorado, those receivers, not just Travis Hunter, Travis was special. One to Blitnikoff, second overall pick, Heisman Trophy winner. We all know what Travis Hunter did back in Colorado. But looking at LeJohntay Wester, looking at Jimmy Horn Jr., they had dudes. Ohio State every year has the best receiving core, basically. But behind them, you want to look at last year, good argument that Colorado had the second best wide receiver core in the nation because of guys like Wester and like Horn Jr. who did their thing. And this is a wide receiver core, when you looked at it, even with McMillan being added, kind of slow and plodding. It's not like Thielen's known for his speed at this point in time. Coker did show that breakaway speed against Dallas, but it's not like he's known for his speed. We know Xavier has it. David Moore, not really seen as a speed guy at this point in his career. They need to add somebody who can make someone miss and maybe do something after the catch outside of what we know Leggett is capable of and what we've seen even Coker do at one point in time last season. So I do love they went out there. They got speed. They got a guy from a program who played in an NFL scheme. Understand this. Pat Shurmur, who was the OC the last year and a half there at Colorado, used to be head coach. What was it last time with the Giants, I believe? So he understands NFL concepts. And now you have Horn, who's playing in those, coming into this offense. Excited to look at that. And you just look at the wide receiver depth chart now. There's legitimate competition all over. Adam Thielen and Xavier Leggett, I would say those are the only two guys whose spots are secure. I do believe Tetairoa McMillan is going to end up being a starter day one, but he's going to have to earn it. And we saw last year when there wasn't a ton of competition because clearly Thielen was going to be in there. Deontay Johnson was going to be in there, and they let it be known very early on. He is our number one. Adams our number two. The number three job was a battle between Jonathan Mingo and Xavier Leggett. And we all knew eventually Leggett would get that job, but they made him earn it. And had he not been injured during OTAs and in training camp, he probably takes it a lot sooner than he did. So there was competition, but not really. This year, true competition. Adam, Xavier, they're probably set there with their spots. Tet, it's going to eventually be him, but he's going to have to beat out Coker, which you would expect that a first-round pick would be able to do. But Jalen Coker's not going to sit there and just let somebody take his job. David Moore, he's also someone going to be battling, maybe not just to get on the field, but for a roster spot. They added Hunter Renfrow on Sunday, who they had talked to a couple of months ago. Hunter Renfrow from Clemson played for the Raiders for a couple of years. He now comes in. Maybe there's thoughts of him being an Adam Thielen replacement down the line. Add Jimmy Horn Jr. into that. It's a pretty crowded wide receiver room and looks a whole lot different than it looked a couple of years ago. When was the last time you could sit here post-draft, heading into the offseason portion of workouts and look at a receiving core in Carolina and think, man, who's going to fill in what spots? Like legitimate competition, which I love. Iron sharpens iron, and that's what Carolina's brought here with their draft picks of Tet McMillan and Jimmy Horn into that wide receiver room. So edge rusher, receiver, love what they did there this past week. And what about the rest of the draft? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Game Time's all-in pricing means no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Back here on Locked On Panthers, giving you my 6 initial thoughts on the 2025 draft class for your Carolina Panthers. Number 3, is it already over for Jonathan Brooks? I don't think so, but when you saw Carolina go out there in the 4th round with pick 114 and take Trevor Etienne, the running back from Georgia, via Florida, which, oh my goodness, wow, that's happening. Arch rivals transferring to other arch rival schools. That's college football nowadays. But Trevor Etienne, when he was selected, I was like, okay, cool. We had heard from a couple of the people we had on the show. I think Trevor Sycamore brought it up. The first one I know who brought it up was Damian Parsons of Locked On NFL Draft, saying the Panthers will be looking at another running back after Jonathan Brooks tore his ACL for the second time in 13 months in that same knee. And there's big questions of what he's going to be after those two ACL tears. And we did see a glimpse of what he was able to be back in 2023 in his final year at Texas prior to tearing his ACL in the brief stints that he played in 2024. But after that, and after a year rehab, maybe not even playing in the 2025 season, is he going to be the guy Carolina saw back in 2023 once we get to 2026? And that's a long time for a guy to not really be playing a lot of football, especially coming up to the NFL level. So Carolina knew this year they needed to get a backup to go with Chuba Hubbard, and they did that in a big way by signing Rico Dowdle to a deal that makes him the running back too. And hell, it might be a 1A, 1B double trouble smash and dash situation in Carolina with Rico and with Chuba Hubbard this upcoming season. So we know that Brooks right then and there probably was not going to be a big factor. But now you look past this upcoming season where Chuba will still be under contract, where Rico Dowdle, I imagine, will probably part ways following the 2025 season as long as everything goes the way he wants it with the Panthers. They will now have Trevor Etienne back there. And I'm very interested to see how much do we see of Trevor Etienne this upcoming season. Does this impact someone like Raheem Blackshear? You already have Jimmy Horn, who can probably return kicks. Now, does Trevor Etienne, is he back there returning kickoffs as well? I did love Trevor back when he was at Florida. This past year at Georgia was banged up a lot, and that's a running back room where they got a lot of guys touching the ball. You got Nate Frazier, you got Cass Jones getting carries, whichever one of the Robinsons, Roderick or Branson was healthy, they were getting an opportunity. So at UGA, it's been a running back factory, not as lately has not really been the case, but still it's been that in the past. Certainly when Kirby Smart first got there with Sony Michel and with Nick Chubb, who were Mark Richt guys, but still those guys were outstanding. But did not see Trevor play up to his potential last year. The year prior to that, years prior rather, he was really good at Florida under Billy Napier, was sharing the backfield with Martrell Johnson. So not nearly as good as his brother Travis was at Clemson. But Travis also played on better, he did play on better teams at Clemson, quite honestly. No offense, Georgia fans. Played on better teams, but he was also the lead back and like the only back Clemson was really utilizing back then, where Trevor always had to share the backfield. But very curious to see, especially once Jonathan Brooks is eventually healthy, what's it going to look like? And what is Trevor Etienne able to do this year to solidify himself down the line to maybe be that top back later on? Number 4, Lathan Ransom. He gets drafted. The Panthers, they mirrored my mock draft and waited until the 4th round, or was it the 5th round, rather? Let me double check that. They waited until, the 5th round. Yeah, they waited until the 5th round, but day 3 to get a safety. I had a safety going in the 4th round and took another one in the 5th round in my mock I did last week. But they waited until, again, day 3 to go out there and to get their safety. And I'm wondering, when will Lathan Ransom see the field? Because if you take somebody in the 5th round, you're probably not expecting them to come in to start for you right away. Not to say that he's not going to get an opportunity, because, again, an undrafted player last year in Damani Richardson had to play. A lot of that was just the underwhelming play from the vets there at safety, the injuries that were suffered by everyone not named Xavier Woods in that safety room as well a year ago. And there's still a spot where Carolina needs to probably address after the draft. And I wonder now, does Julian Blackman get signed pretty close to after the draft's over, which it is? Do you see maybe Marcus Williams get a call and come back to Carolina? Blackman would be the one I'm looking at. This move, it's good as far as bringing another young body and somebody who can be a good tackler for you, can bring physicality and, of course, championship pedigree from this past season at Ohio State. But this is not going to stop Carolina, in my opinion, from going out there and still bringing in a veteran safety, which I felt like was needed anyways, unless they got a safety really early there on day 2 and then maybe got another one later on and doubled up. But I felt like either way, they probably were going to circle back and get a vet, and bringing in Lathan Ransom, I think it pretty much solidifies that. But I do wonder how early we'll get on the field and what kind of role he play this upcoming season. Number 5. It's something that the Panthers did not do, and I wondered if they would do it just based off of how things have played out with this particular player this offseason. That player, of course, is Taylor Moton, who is going to play out the final year of his deal in Carolina on a $31.3 million cap hit. Dan Morgan, Brant Tillis, both of them said the Panthers had a plan. whether he was going to potentially be extended or if they're going to sit on it, and they chose to sit on it and felt like they would be fine, that they could do everything they wanted to do this offseason by letting Taylor Moton sit with that enormous cap hit. And so far, they've been proven right. They were able to get back a running back in Rico Dowdle. They were able to go out there and to get multiple starters on defense. When you look at Bobby Brown III, they brought in Turk Wharton as a rotational guy, Pat Jones II as a rotational guy, Javon Berg as well. They brought back all the offensive linemen that they needed to. So they've done everything that they've wanted, even though Taylor Moton, again, $31.3 million cap hit. So I did wonder, all right, you did not extend him, which I felt like could have been in order, would have opened up nearly $13 million. You did not, I think, wisely restructure that deal yet again. Obviously did not cut him, which good thing. That would have been the worst of the three options out there, but they decided to just sit on it. Would that mean that then going to the draft, they would be looking for a replacement, someone they could redshirt and then potentially start there at right tackle, assuming that Moton departs past 2025, but they did not do that. Instead, he's still here, which is a good thing, obviously, and I didn't expect him to not be here post-draft, but there's not a new offensive tackle in this room. And I do wonder, maybe Brady Christensen, does he find a way to maybe set himself up to be the starter after this season? He never came in at right tackle last year. It was always Josh Nyman, who, yes, is still here on the roster, who was that right tackle whenever Taylor Moton was dealing with his issues as far as injury goes last year. So the fact they did not get an offensive tackle, that makes me really curious to see how things play out with Moton and if there's any sort of contract extension talks that happen the rest of the offseason or maybe even in season next year that keeps him here past 2025. And if not, all right, maybe offensive tackle will be a big move for Carolina as far as what they need to do next offseason. We'll also throw out Ike Ekwonu, had his fifth-year option exercised over the weekend, so he is here to stay in 25 and, of course, and in 2026. And finally, last thought when looking at this draft class, I'm starting to like the tight end room, and I really do like what they brought in here with Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame. Tommy Tremble and JT Sanders is already a pretty good foundation that the Panthers had heading into this draft. Tommy, solid number 2 option, not really a receiving tight end. He can do a little bit of things. You've seen him hurdle people multiple times now. Solid player. Happy he's still back here in Carolina, but good blocker as well. JT has the upside as a receiving tight end. We saw that at Texas. We saw it a little bit last year when he was really starting to come along later in the season, had a neck injury, wasn't the same guy. I do think we'll see a step forward for him this upcoming season and more consistency. So they already have those two. Going to throw in Mitchell Evans, who comes from a long line of Notre Dame receiving tight ends. Emphasis on receiving tight ends, because that's not what Tommy Tremble was asked to do in South Bend. But Mitchell Evans, he was. You got to 2023. Before he tore his ACL, he was the leading receiver for Notre Dame. Now, that was more an indictment on just how bad the receivers at Notre Dame were that season, but still, Mitchell Evans was leading them in receiving. So, good player. Last year, played more of a complimentary role as Notre Dame got better receivers in the portal and helped them get to a national title before losing to Ohio State. I really like this move, especially for a guy that you got in the 6th round. 5th round, 163. That I like. And we had talked about the two. I think we had brought up Lathan Ransom on Friday night after day 2. Had talked about Mitchell Evans when looking at safety and tight end, 2 spots I thought would make sense. Certainly safety made sense, but tight end made sense as well. So be able to get another receiving tight end, one who comes from a school that has a pedigree of developing those tight ends, one of them already on the roster, but in particular, the receiving type of tight ends. I like that, and I like what the starting tight, where the tight end room is now when you look at Tommy Tremble, JT Sanders, and Mitchell Evans as the 3 who probably would be in the top tier of that rotation for them this upcoming season. So that is how I feel right now, initially coming out of the 2025 NFL draft for the Panthers. A couple more thoughts when looking at this draft class and just looking at the draft as a whole for Carolina coming up here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. The Armada Pick of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. This week, we're highlighting the top pick from our draft, the one selection that truly stood out, the guy who showcased his strength and power to push the Carolina Panthers forward as we look ahead to next season. This week's Armada and clear-cut top pick of the draft is Tataroa McMillan. McMillan's size and ball skills is exactly what Carolina needed at the wide receiver spot moving forward, and like the Nissan Armada, McMillan conquers the field with capability and confidence. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what I think Tyrone McMillan can do here. It's clear that our top pick of the draft is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of their outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Some closing thoughts here when looking at the 2025 draft class for the Panthers. And again, going to spend the rest of this week looking back at this draft class, grading it, looking at the winners and the losers on the roster who are now impacted by these selections. Going to have a guest on, and then next week going to look at each and every one of these guys again by trying to get some of the locked on colleges to come on and give us their perspective on all, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 of the Carolina Panthers draft picks from the 2025 class. But looking at it, last week I told you I'll go into the draft, and I felt like at the end of the day, this draft was more about the future for the organization than it was about this year. Like outside of safety and edge rusher, I didn't really see any positions that were necessarily up for grabs as far as day one starters. Now, obviously, with Tyrone McMillan being drafted 8th overall, that changes things at the wide receiver room, but I could have seen them getting a wide receiver like they did with Jimmy Horn and maybe somebody else there possibly in the 3rd round and still having Adam, still having Xavier and Jalen and then David Moore as like the top 4 with those other guys providing depth. And based off also what Ejiro Vero, at least how Mike Kay looked at it, like you look at defensively, they were going to lean on veterans. And the Panthers did that this offseason by getting a lot of guys with free agency who could come in and can play those key snaps. They brought in Bobby Brown III and Turk Orton to play key snaps on the defensive interior. I don't know if Cam Jackson, who they took out of Florida in the 5th round, is going to get a lot of those snaps with those guys already being here. But in the future, like Jaden Crumedy, he could be that guy in the interior for the Panthers. Absolutely. You look at safety, like now you got Lathan Ransom coming in, but I would think that they're probably still going to be very interested in bringing in a vet, like I mentioned earlier, someone like a Julian Blackman, I would think would make some sense. So Ted McMillan is absolutely going to be a starter this year, whether it's week 1, week 2, whenever it happens. Like he will be a key piece of this team, provided, of course, knock on wood, that he's healthy, but he's going to be expected to play. And Dave Canales already came out like, yes, he's going to have to earn it, but we're expecting him to play. So that one's very clear. The rest, like it'll be interesting to see how edge rusher plays out. There's reports out there that apparently pre-draft, the Panthers were shopping Jadeveon Clowney. And then even on Friday night, when asked multiple times, Dan Morgan was non-committal about Clowney's future in Carolina. So that to me is telling me that he's probably not going to be sticking around, especially when they drafted Nick Scordon and Princely Monmielen on day 2. And when you're taking a guy in the 2nd round and a guy, like if you're taking anyone on the first 2 days of the draft, like you're expecting those guys to play. You're expecting them to be impact players. And now you got a crowded edge rusher room and you brought in one of them. He's still a younger guy. I know that they like him. Pat Jones II, I don't know necessarily their overall feelings there, but they signed him for a reason. The older player in that room is Clowney. And of course, DJ Johnson, not a good situation for him after, well, he's not produced anything, but now you get some other day 2 picks like he was a couple years ago coming in, and they're going to be guys who are going to be trying to take your spot. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly Scorton and Monmielen are able to get on the field, and then how things play out with Jadeveon Clowney off the field and whether Carolina wants to move on from him or not. You look at Etienne, again, this is going to be a guy who's going to come in, be a backup, but he has a chance to maybe in the future be that guy, especially if Jonathan Brooks is not able to ever get back to full health. Cam Jackson, as I mentioned, he's going to come in, be a backup, maybe get a chance to rotate in at some point in time, but the expectation would be in the future. Like these are a lot of guys that are future contributors, not contributors necessarily in 2025. Lathan Ransom, there's an opportunity to contribute. I just wonder, is that what they exactly want him to do as a 5th round pick? Mitchell Evans, another guy who I think because of the opportunity will get a chance to contribute, but will be behind. Tommy Trimble will also be behind, in my opinion, JT Sanders. So we'll see. Like Jimmy Horn as well, really intriguing as a smaller wide receiver who provides speed, what he's able to do in this receiver room. That's a guy I would love to see make the team, especially after what I saw from him the last couple of years up in Boulder. So this is a draft class where there's 3 guys for sure, like McMillan, Scorton, Monmielen, that I would think were going to be contributors this upcoming season. But everybody else, Etienne, Ransom, maybe it's a chance. Jackson. I mean, Evans probably gets an opportunity. Horn, we'll see. A lot of it is just like thinking ahead to the future more so than like what can they do for us right now, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They got it pretty much figured out in a way. Edge, there's questions there. Offensively, they didn't get an offensive lineman. A receiver, there's still plenty of talent there coming back, but you add in Ted McMillan. I am very interested to see how things play out here, where there's going to be true competition for first time in a long time. Real competition at wide receiver, real competition at edge, hell, tight end. You got competition there, tight competition across the board on this roster. And that's all due to what they were able to do in this draft of the weekend up there in Green Bay. So excited about the direction of this organization. Excited to continue to break down the 2025 draft class here the rest of the week, next couple of weeks here on Locked On Panthers. That's going to wrap up on this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show for free over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter at Julian Council, where I'll be back answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions here on a Friday, either at me or DM me over on Twitter or at me over on Blue Sky to get those questions into me right now. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And coming up on tomorrow's show, I'll be grading the 2025 draft class for your Carolina Panthers.